Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. If you are interested in working with me in person, you now have the opportunity with Soul Discovery Workshop. We will spend 2 days discovering your spiritual gifts, unlocking your abilities to channel, to really tap into your intuition, to meet your guides and your angelic team, as well as diving in to the Akashic Records. If you are interested and you are in the Huntington Beach, LA area, or even if you're not and you feel like taking a short trip, please head to my website at infinitesoullove.com and you can head to the store. Right there, you will find the Soul Discovery Workshop, which is September 16th and 17th, 2023. Welcome back. Today, we are talking about dragon spirit power. And here talking with us about this is Fiona Black. She is an intuitive channel and a midwife for the soul. Her passion is to support conscious creative women to deeply integrate their soul gifts and wisdom into their life and business so that they live a truly purpose-fueled, powerful, and prosperous life. So not only is she all of these wonderful things, but she is also a fellow Akashic Record reader, which I'm super excited to talk to her about all of that because I very rarely get to talk to other people who are often in the records. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. Fiona, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too. So how I like to usually start these conversations is to ask you what your spiritual journey has been like. Like, what is your origin story, if you will, about your spiritual awakening?
That's a great question. I always feel like I've been awake to a certain level from a really young age, super intuitive, had lots of preemptive dreams where I would dream things to happen and they would.
Oh, yeah.
Just very open and also very questioning of this world. I didn't understand a lot of things. I didn't understand how so much pain and destruction could come from religion. I didn't understand. I looked at the world and I didn't understand why why everyone was behaving the way they were behaving. So from quite a young age, I had let's say like a zoomed out view of what was happening in life, but didn't really know, didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And that was just who I was. So I was very good at getting on with schooling, grade 8 student. I was very studious and could like color in the lines really, really well. And I did that. I colored in the lines and I went to university and then I went traveling when I was 21 and I kind of felt like I'd been like sucked out of the education system and all of a sudden I was in Australia and I was like, oh my God, what have I been doing? What have I been missing? It was really like I'd been unplugged from the matrix almost, from
right.
Schooling. Even though I'd been kind of awake during the schooling, it was just this sense that, oh, I really could be anything and do anything. Whereas at school, I was very like a grade A student. So I'd be encouraged to do medicine and, into those doing those kind of degrees. But I was a dancer.
Oh, okay.
Since I was 7 and all I wanted to do was dance. But I was kind of told that, dancers don't get money. You're kind of off the shelf by the time you're 30. And so I was like, okay. So I went and did a degree in physiotherapy, but I'm a creative at heart. I'm a dancer. And physiotherapy was great. It was like very logical thing to do. Yeah, when I went traveling at 21, I was like, I want to be a dancer.
Right. So did you pursue that at all? Did you end up pursuing that?
Yeah. I went back home and I went to London and did some auditions and got back into training. But I got this hip injury and I was like, and I ran out of money. I was like, oh, got to go do the physio thing.
Sure, yeah.
Which I did. Yeah, and I pursued that career for quite a while. And I lived in London and I worked as a physio and a Pilates teacher and I really enjoyed it, but I knew that life wasn't for me. And I started to kind of have these pulls to go live in another country, to go be somewhere else. And I went on this holiday to Thailand with a friend and I met this guy. And he lived in Canada on Vancouver Island. And It was a 2-week whirlwind, and I just knew that my life was going to change forever. And it did.
Beautiful. Wow.
Canada and Vancouver Island is such a magical place. It was like my awakening happened kind of on steroids, because I think that BC, Canada, Vancouver Island in particular, it's one of the most pristine places on the planet. I feel like the water is so clear. The nature is just so there. And I feel that when we return to nature, I tree planted. My husband was a tree planter. So I was just out in the wild for like
cool.
2 years. And it was rough and incredible. And I did a lot of letting go. I let go of who I thought I was. I came from England. I was a middle-class person. I had a physio degree, all these things I'd labeled myself as, and I came to Canada and went tree planting. And I was like, who the fuck am I?
Right.
I'm not this. And then I was on the land, and like to stand in like a clear cut in this pristine place, it was like the grief, like the grief of the land, just the grief of humanity. There was just a really big experience of emotional release and deep, deep connection to the earth, to Mother. And yeah, so many things spiraled from there. But I really think that transition when I was 26, backpack on my back, moved to Canada, didn't know, just knew this one guy.
Right.
And, didn't know what was going to happen. And it just all kind of
snowballed from there. Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting is that it's always about that space that the universe gives you when you are ready to have that space. And so, as you were saying, when you arrived, you kind of, had to readjust. But it sounds like there was a lot of space as well, a lot of space for you to be able to experience sort of the loss of who you were, or the grief of that. Right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like, as soon as you plug yourself out of the matrix of having to do something or be someone, which moving allowed me to do that, because I could just rewrite my whole story, right? No one knew me. I didn't know me. I'm only 26. It was like, coming up to Saturn return, isn't it? 27. Like when you're really like, okay, I got, I'm an adult, and, but it was kind of like when everything fell apart. But to be honest, I feel like my whole life, I've had a lot of space. I've worked full time for 8 months of my entire life.
No kidding.
When I was 23, I was like, okay, I got to get back into this physiotherapy thing. And I went and worked in the hospital, and I was just like dying.
Yeah.
I would have these it sounds so naive, but I would be like, how can I only earn this amount of money? How can somebody else be telling me that I have to go to work from 8 till 4 and I only get like 3 weeks holiday? Like, every part of me was like, what is this? How on earth do people do this? And so from then on, I became self-employed. I worked in physio and Pilates clinics, but in private clinics.
Yeah.
And so I kind of created my whole life with a lot of space.
That's incredible, because I feel I went through something similar. I was in corporate for a bit longer than you were. So you said 8 months. I was in corporate for about 9 years. But after that, I had always had the entrepreneurial spirit. So I started my own business in 2005, and same here. Like, I haven't really looked back from there. And it's really beautiful that you had that experience and that you had that journey, because one of the things that you do in the Akashic Records and the things that you help people with is actually their businesses and how they actually thrive in their livelihood, essentially, correct?
Yeah. For me, it's about, how can I get paid for being me?
Yeah.
Like, how can I show up as my fullest self and be gifted from the universe for being me? Because I just knew, like, even though I love working with people, I've always worked with people. Like, I've been a healing artist, let's put it that way, since I was like 18.
Sure.
And so there's parts of it that I loved, but I didn't love the systems. I'm all about freedom. My company is Freedom with Fiona.
Yeah.
And so supporting other people to just really understand what they love, what their energy is at a soul essence, because that's so important too, because I deeply recognize that I would probably have got chronic fatigue, some kind of nebulous kind of autoimmune disorder, if I had tried to stay in corporate or like a 9 to 5 situation, where my sensitive system would have just been like really buggered, like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like,
No, it's okay.
I wouldn't have been able to manage. But most of all, I think my soul's always been very connected to me. Like it would have been soul crushing for me. And I
Right.
just recognized that very, very, very early on. And it hasn't been easy financially.
Right.
Like, it's taken me a long time to learn how to value my soul gifts, not
Right.
what I'm doing to earn a living, so that shift has taken me a long time, but I've had the time to process it and to do it. And yeah, so that really lights my heart up now. But I love that piece about like helping people shift from corporate into entrepreneurship, or helping healers to make it a business, not a hobby, like it's that ownership. Yeah.
Well, and it's also important, as you were saying, that we realize that we can get paid for what our gifts are, right? Because I think so many times in this particular realm of healing, and let's say, Reiki, we'll kind of throw that in there. We'll kind of throw in other modalities in the spiritual healing realms. And it's almost as if people kind of think that, oh, well, because we're spiritual, we shouldn't be making as much money, or we shouldn't be, really abundant in what we're doing. And it's so the antithesis of who we are and what we're actually here for, right? Which is to break out of those sort of old stories, and those old stories about how, if you're in some sort of spiritual something or other, that, you have to take a vow of poverty and all of those things. And these are the things that I'm sure you work with your clients on as well, is like clearing all these vows and doing all these things, like to make sure people are no longer in that sort of lack mentality, and be able to step into their power and say, yeah, I'm worth whatever it is that I feel I'm worth, and I'm not going to accept a limit to that.
Yeah. It's so powerful and so important right now, this piece in particular, because the lack consciousness is prevalent. It's so prevalent in healers and artists and creatives, right?
Yeah.
Because society hasn't deemed it as worthy. It hasn't, it's like, oh, the thing you do on the side, like, oh, this is very beautiful. But, we're coming into a stage of our evolution where we recognize deeply that beauty, oh my gosh, like beauty this is how we create heaven on earth. Through beauty, through creation, through healing. We have to.
Yeah.
Like, it's like we have to step into this. And I can't remember who I heard this from, but it just, how sometimes someone just says something and it, but sometimes someone just says something in a way and there's an energetic vibration behind it, or their consciousness is at this point where it awakens it within you. And they would like, transformational work should be the most expensive thing on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Would be the most expensive thing on the planet, because as you support someone to transform their consciousness, to open up to more possibility, to feel the joy and the aliveness of being who they are, to let go of things that no longer serve, to stop people pleasing, like all of the things that we do in our sessions to support people, we raise the collective consciousness of humanity.
It's pretty valuable.
It's like, what is more important than that? Like,
yeah.
I've got goosebumps.
Me too. And I've got the chills going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, me too. Right?
So I have talked about this before on this podcast, but I'll reference it because it is relevant. It's when I was deciding to work with the first coaches that I worked with. This was while I was going through my big spiritual awakening, the big dark night of the soul, all of that. This was, a little over 10 years ago, I would say, is when that started. But then like 4 years went by and I didn't know that I was going through a spiritual awakening. So I had 4 years of like crazy making all the things in my brain, making me think that this isn't real, or well, yes, this is real, and no, it's not, that whole back and forth.
Yeah.
And so when I finally decided to work with coaches, the coaches that I found, they were quite expensive, but I was feeling like my guides were like, no, you have to work with these two people because these are the people that are going to get you to where you need to go. And I was like, okay. And so I literally spent the money. And the second I did it, I started having that sort of regret of spending the money. And the one message that I heard from my guides was, you would spend this in a heartbeat on a, car, or on it wasn't that expensive, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you would spend something like that, no problem, on anything else. Why wouldn't you spend it on yourself? Right. And your inner work is more important than anything that you would spend your money on anywhere as far as like material goods or anything like that. And so as the story goes, actually, I ended up getting that exact amount of money back in a check in the mail 2 weeks later
Awesome.
by some random insurance claim that didn't go through like years ago. And then it just sort of showed up at my doorstep. Right. So like, that's one of my favorite stories about how the abundance, first of all, comes back to you. Second of all, it is so important to invest in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
It's about, well, one, we don't, especially women, I have to say, like we don't, right? Like we haven't, that's not what we see. It's not what we learn through our family lineage. Usually women put themselves last, especially mothers.
Right.
That's definitely through my lineage. And so like the audacity of spending that money on yourself for something that is nebulous too, right? It's like not a tangible thing. It's like, but ultimately what I think every time you invest in yourself, that's what you realize. It's that a lot, some people are worried about losing their investment or making the wrong investment. And I think what's most important is that when you trust yourself, when you make the investment in yourself and not the coach, not them, then you can never fail because you will always get exactly what you need from that situation, even if it's not what you thought it was. And when you trust yourself and know, you put it back in your hands again. So again, it's you're the empowered one then. So it's not you going, oh, I hope this works out, giving the chunk of money and feeling like the disempowered party and it's in the coach's hands. It's like, oh no, this is about me investing in myself and stepping up to the plate, and whatever happens is actually ultimately on me because I'm creating this, ultimate responsibility. But that takes time to shift into that consciousness, right?
Sure.
Like it takes,
absolutely.
It's it's an evolutionary thing, but we can support people to do it quicker when we've embodied it ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You said earlier about people with autoimmune diseases and basically getting sick from their jobs, essentially. Yeah. And, it just makes me wonder like how many people out there are in the same position that you were, where they don't know how to unplug, or that they are just making themselves sick because they're still in that cycle of, oh, okay, I have to do this because society says I have to do this, right? So when somebody is in that space, the best thing that you can do is invest in yourself. Like that is the one thing that you can do, is to say, even if like you're not ready to leave a corporate job or whatever it happens to be, like that first step of investing in yourself and actually starting to do this work could be the catalyst for you to be able to start healing yourself, start living a more aligned life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what your experience has been in the Akashic Records, because you talked about sort of how you became a little bit more aware and that you were getting sort of prophetic dreams and stuff like that. How did you first discover the Akashic Records and how did you start working in them?
Actually, it took me a long time to find the Akashic Records. So I started off as physiotherapy and Pilates. And then when I moved to Canada, I didn't get my physiotherapy accredited here. So I wasn't recognized. So like everything fell away, including my profession to rely on financially. And so I had my Pilates training. And so I did that. And then I found something called Body Talk. Body Talk is a modality where you literally listen to the wisdom of the body. And I did it for 10 years. I loved it. I became an advanced Body Talk practitioner. And that really opened my eyes to listening to that the body holds all the wisdom and that there's so much within it. And it's a huge modality with, many directions that you go with it. But you use muscle testing. So I began to really use my intuition intentionally, consciously, because a lot of the time, we're all intuitive, but most of us are kind of what I call that subconsciously intuitive, where, we're in the shower or in the forest and, we get those ideas, but it's not because we've necessarily asked for it. There's a moment and they kind of come in. And so what Body Talk did for me was help me train my conscious connection to my intuition. So I'm actually asking the body for yes or no answers. And so that really kind of set the stage for me really trusting myself and my intuition. But it was very body-based. I've come from a very body-based kind of background. I'm also very emotionally based. So I did a lot of emotional body work. But there was more, like you do this work. And I was like, but there's something more. It's like I've studied the physical realm as a physiotherapist. I'm understanding of that. I really studied the emotional body because I'm a Cancerian. I'm highly emotional.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of work around the emotional body, and then the mental body. Like that was one of I think in awakening, I think the mental body is the one that, often gets us first. If it's not an illness, where we begin to question our thoughts, like we begin to go, is that true? Is that really true? So I'd done all that and I was still looking for more. I was having issues with money.
Okay.
I was having financial. I was like, I feel like I've created everything. Beautiful family, beautiful relationships. I feel free in my relationships, free in time, free in blah, 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 blah. Financial freedom. That was the piece for me that had, was the sticking point. And what kept coming to me was, it's karmic. It's karmic. It's karmic. It's karmic. I'm like, okay, it's karmic. I didn't have any training in any kind of soul level stuff.
Right.
I did some really heavy duty spiritual awakening with unity consciousness and things like that. But that wasn't really soul level stuff. And so, I kept getting it. It was karmic. And then all of a sudden, how one day, you just get an email in your inbox and you're like, where did that come from? And this email is a modality called soul realignment with Andrea Hess. And I'm like, okay, let's go look at that. Just jumped onto the old webinar and I was like, well, this is everything. This is it. And jumped into, I think that was 2019 or 2018.
Okay.
My practice and my life took off as soon as I started doing that work, because it was like the missing piece to the puzzle for me. I feel like I've gone around life like looking for pieces of my puzzle, like of the healing puzzle. And it was like the soul piece, the Akashic record piece for me was like, oh yes. This is what brings it all together for me.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it does. I would say that it did about the same thing for me. I had been sort of searching for like the different modalities that I'd be using, because I was told like 5 years before I even accessed the records, I was told that I'd be working in them. And I'm like, cool, how am I going to do that? Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
So then I ended up trying all these different modalities, so I kind of tried Reiki on a little bit. I didn't get a certification, but I tried it on and just see, to see if it was something that I wanted to do. And I was like, it feels okay, but it doesn't feel like the whole thing, right? Yeah. It feels like a part of it. And then, I went into, sort of more tarot and more divination tools and things like that. And then I was like, this feels like part of it, but this isn't the thing. This isn't it, But as you were saying, it is like you're gathering little puzzle pieces throughout the entire journey. So for you, the physio was actually probably a really big piece of that puzzle too.
Absolutely.
Because having all of that experience in that, to be able to pull that into the body work, to then be able to pull that into the Akashic Records as well. Like once you start seeing all the pieces fall into place, you're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
It's so interesting. And the one thing that I really love about my physiotherapy training is that it gave me such an amazing groundwork for like how to be a professional person, how to be a professional, how to hold confidentiality, how to run a session.
Yeah.
Those fundamental pieces, which I think some people miss when they know that they want to step into some kind of modality, but maybe they've come from a job that isn't anything like that. And they kind of get thrust into working with people one-to-one. And I think that would be a little bit challenging to start with.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I really like the groundwork, that I got with that. And it is all perfect, isn't it? It's like every single chapter of your life is perfection to get you to where you are, in that moment. And I feel like there has to be a certain readiness in your consciousness to wake up to the Akashic Records, because it's so mind-boggling. Like it's so infinite, the potentiality and the possibility. And it's like opening a can of worms of the universe, literally. Like you can go anywhere, do anything, channel and tune into anything and find out any information. It's like you got to be at a certain level of consciousness that your mind wouldn't actually be blown.
Exactly. Yeah.
To hold it in an embodied way.
Yeah.
So it's not just some, and I know the work that you do is the same. Like transformational work is in the body. I'm not interested in flying off to the fifth dimension and hanging out there all the time and not actually embodying it into my life. And so I'm like that with clients too. I'm like, so the action, the choices, the new choices, the things that you're doing. This is how you anchor it into your third dimensional body and reality, you know? So we're not just, oh, you know, in a past life you did this, and it's really interesting information and fascinating. People find it fascinating, but I'm like, nope, let's like introduce, let's like, okay, like how can you use this as fuel?
Exactly. I call that past life tourism. I'm like, no tourism today. Sorry. Because it doesn't happen often, but I have had clients ask me like, oh, can you tell me if I lived here and what year it was and all these things? And I was like, I could, the guides would tell me, but if it doesn't serve a purpose, there's no reason for you to spend your time on it. Right. And in fact, things like that could potentially even hold you back too. If you're attached to some version of you in the past that, you know, you may have found out about that you don't need to know. Right.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
yeah.
I kind of call it Looky Loo, you know, like Looky Loo.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know, come and have a look and cruise around, but I'm not really interested in, you know, changing or doing anything different, which is fine too. Like that's all trying things on. I'm just here for when you're ready, the transformation.
Well, and I find that when people are ready, that's when they find you, right? It's most of the time. There are a couple of times I think where I've had clients where they're kind of ready, but they still kind of want to know that other stuff too. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, they're kind of on the fence on both sides, you know? So, and I think that that's, you know, it's all beautiful because it's all going to prepare you for what you need to do eventually.
Yeah.
So what are some of the cooler things that you've experienced in the records?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just fascinated by all of it. Every time I go in, I'm blown away. I'm always blown away about how I can share with them a past life that appears. I don't like the word blocking because I don't ultimately believe in it, but I'm just going to use that word because people understand it. Yeah. So, you know, clearing a life or bringing up a life that appears to be blocking or restricting them in this current life. And then they say, I've had that exact experience.
Yeah.
Like, every single session, I'll like pull something and I'll be like, oh, this is quite, you know, like this one feels quite heavy, or this one feels, you know, there's some emotion there. And they're like, yeah, that's because that's also happened now. And for me, when that happens, you know, you don't know this person, you've never met them, you draw out this situation from a past life that's blocking them, and they've recreated it in this life. And then you get to let go and clear that pattern of attracting that kind of energy into their life. I mean, the liberation in that, and for them too, when they're like kind of, how the hell did you pull that past life? Right. And no, you know, like for me, a lot of times that's when people really go, oh, right, yeah, this is true. This is real. Those moments where they can so relate to that past life, because I'll start talking about it and they'll start crying. I'm like, okay, we're onto something here. Yeah, you know, because it's so visceral. Yeah. So visceral. So clearing karmic patterns for me, I don't know. I just blows my mind every time.
Me too. I'm right there with you. And quite frankly, from the very first session I ever did when I was practicing, you know, when you are just sort of getting started after the training, and, you know, I was doing a bunch of free sessions just to, you know, sort of get my legs ready, you know, my Akashic Records sea legs. and when I was having people say the same thing, like, you know, oh my gosh, are you talking about this lifetime or the past lifetime? I was like, no, this is the past lifetime, because that's exactly what's happening in this lifetime. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's how you know that it's a confirmation that this is something that you're repeating, like that pattern that you're repeating. And so each and every time I'm still, and I shouldn't be because I've been doing this for so long now, but like, I'm still surprised.
Yeah, me too.
Surprised. I'm still surprised at like the information that I get sometimes. There's stuff that they tell me that I'm like, there's no way that I would have known this about, let's say, how souls are formed or how they break off from divine source energy, or like any of these little things that we find out in the records. It's like, this is not information I had in my brain prior to this. Right. Yeah. And that's how I know that it's real, because it's like, this is all stuff that you're getting while you're in the records. And sometimes I'll get out of sessions and I'm like, ooh, I got to write that down for myself to remember what that was actually about. Cause maybe it was more of a collective message. Maybe it was more of a, like, you know, an overall message that, oh, this is how the universe works kind of thing. And I'm like, wow, that's very cool. Right now. So I'm wondering, do you have the same thing with because I know you channel as well. So do you have the same thing where at the end of a session, you pretty much forget the whole thing?
I try to. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're moving out the way. It's almost like I'm perched on my shoulder, if you know what I mean. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just flowing. It's just flowing through. Yeah. Moving out of your own way for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that like every time you go to that fifth dimensional space, every time you go to the records, I often tune in with Archangel and Metatron. They are not always there, but sometimes they are. And it's just like the energy I get from Metatron is like always kind of mind blowing. And I always channel like through from that place. But what I was going to say is that when you go into the records and you go in like daily, go in a lot, it's like your spiritual gifts go on steroids because you literally are tuned into the energy and the consciousness of the universe. It's like the internet, isn't it? It's like this. And so things speed up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like with the Akashic Records, it's kind of mind blowing. You almost can't keep up with it, I think, and yeah, I've been opened up to channeling some really interesting things recently, which I would never have been open to because I'd have been afraid. I think we can find information about star seeds, about, other places that you've been to, other planets that you've existed on. And for me, when I first started learning about that, that was pretty woo for me. I didn't grow up thinking about that.
Right.
I was a little like scared of the whole alien idea. And I was like, maybe I won't go there. But, the Akashic Records opens up to all of that. And then recently in January, I was in meditation and I got taken to this ship, which sounds so strange, but I'm beginning to talk about these experiences now. But and they called themselves the Council of Light.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't know anything about that. I hadn't looked up anything about that. And so I've been kind of going back there and just kind of doing some training with them.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never actually thought about doing that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, it didn't come in my mind to consciously do it, but I went there and it was amazing and powerful and started connecting to some of the beings that were part of the Council of Light. And I was like, I'm just going to keep going back and seeing what I learn or what's there for me or, what I channel through.
Yeah.
But I would never have been open to anything like that if I hadn't been an Akashic record worker. I'd have been like, what the hell?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I have come across the Council of Light, but only through other clients. So meaning like when I was doing a session, like they would come up or, they would give messages. I think I've channeled them a couple of times because they just happen to show up. Right. But like, I've never actually considered, and that's the funny part. Like, this is actually one of my, I don't want to say blind spots. It's not a full blind spot, but it's one of my things that I would like to work on is that, I learn all these really magical things through client sessions, or I channel some really amazing information, but then I don't actually go into the records for myself very often. Right. Yeah. So I did in the beginning, I, sort of took a look at a lot of the different things that I had been experiencing or cycles or things like that. So I did that in the beginning, but I stopped doing it after a while. And recently I was just reminded like, hey, you need to go in the records too. Like you need to go and do this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can do that.
Us humans are so like that, aren't we? Do it for everybody else and we almost forget about it for ourselves. But
yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's very true.
Yeah.
I love this conversation so much because we originally came in to discuss dragon spirit power, right? Yeah. And, there's so many other things that are surrounding the Akashic Records and the topic that are so, so important. So getting into where you channel and like whom you're channeling, you were talking about Metatron, we can work with whomever shows up, right? And whoever our clients are sort of connected to, that happens as well. Yeah. So do you often get the sort of nudge, or do you know who's there? Like, do they tell you right away? Do you have to ask? And when it comes to, let's say, because there are people out there that work with unicorn spirit and dragon spirit and all these different things. So like, do they present themselves? And so exactly who they are, or how does that work for you?
Usually when I go into the records, someone might just be there. Not every time. Sometimes I just like go and do the client session, but sometimes I'm like, oh, there's Archangel Michael. Or, Metatron's got a message here.
Yeah.
like you say, like, I think it's something that evolves with time and your openness, because to begin with, I'm so focused on getting information for the client that it's all there, but I'm just not aware of it, or I'm just not bringing that information in. And so I think now my mind has been blown so much more to what's possible, that more of these kind of energies will probably show themselves, because I'm just more open to it, because I can see them. It's like, consciousness, we can only see what's in our it's like we ride waves of consciousness. That's kind of how I see it. And then all of a sudden we have this expansion, and we hop up, or we hop into a different reality where these things are. But usually when I go into the records, I might just sense or feel. I don't really see, I'm not super visual, but I just sense or feel an energy there. And I'll either just know, oh, this is this, or I'll ask. Yeah.
Right. Oh, how cool. So then tell me how you discovered the dragon spirit.
This is a whole big conversation too, because I am in fact the mother of dragons.
I love that. Okay. So huge geek, huge Game of Thrones fan. So you just yeah.
So it's all about my daughter. So she's 12 now, 13 this year. She has talked about dragons since the very beginning. I remember having a conversation with her when she was around 3 or 4. She's always a little bit awkward. Very, very nervous of other people. We could kind of roar and hide behind my legs, like when someone came to the door. Very just interesting. I'd be like, oh, this is really interesting behavior. And one time she sat down with me and she said, Mom, I just find it really hard to be a human because I'm a dragon. And I was like, okay. And so I've always let her explore and experience this. I never, ever shut it down. We've had lots of discussions, and, she's 12 now, so she's very conscious of it. But my discussions with her, I was trying to understand. So is that you have a dragon on your shoulder? You know what I mean? You got a dragon spirit that walks with you. She's like, no, I can simultaneously shift between a dragon form and human form.
How cool.
Yeah. And so she's currently writing a novel on dragons.
Is she? Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah. And her room is full of dragons. Everything is dragon for her. And so dragon energy is incredibly powerful, incredibly huge energy, fiercely loving, fiercely loyal, fiercely protective of the earth. And dragon energy is coming in really strong because they're needed to help support this process that we're in. And my daughter had and still has, but it's easier now, just a very, very big, powerful energy, very, very emotionally expressive. And I did not know how to cope with that when she was little. Come from a very English background where it's, the seen not heard, tantrum is bad, all of that stuff. And she was all of the other things where, you're bad if you tantrum and express yourself fully. And so I did it. I mean, I feel like my relationship with my daughter is actually the core of my biggest awakening process, because she taught me how to be bigger than her. I had to be able to expand my personal energy and power to be bigger than her, so she felt safe. Because imagine coming in to this really weird human world with a massive energy.
Right.
And feeling bigger than everybody, if you know what I mean. And your mum is smaller than you. And so there's no one to kind of say, hey, you're safe, you're okay. And so in those moments of her kind of extreme expression, I had to learn to, instead of shrink and be I don't know how to deal with this, I had to learn to be bigger, had to learn to expand and grow so I could hold her, so that she could feel safe in her emotional expression in those moments. So so I've been connected to dragon energy for a long time, but none of it came into my work. None of it, I just held that space for my daughter, was fascinated, asked her lots of questions because they're just so connected to source still. And she's could tell you anything, which is amazing. But this January, I was in meditation. I had a couple of big things happen this year, and I had a dragon energy come to me. And it always gives me goosebumps, because this dragon just if you can imagine a huge dragon nose to nose with you, their massive nostrils. This dragon was don't you know who you are? Don't you know who you are?
Wow.
Because you don't mess with a dragon. They're so interesting because they're very blunt, very straight up, incredibly assertive. and very
Yeah.
powerful energies, but they're also really, really playful, extremely loving and silly.
Yeah.
But this dragon coming up to me, for me, was like, oh yeah, it's time for me to like stop. I want to say fannying around. Sorry, no, but stop like playing like you're this small little unawakened person.
Yeah.
Like,
Making yourself small.
You've been, yeah, you've been awake for a very long time. You have mastery within you. It's time for you to show up and hold that and be that.
Right.
And it was a really powerful, incredible moment.
Did you work with that dragon again?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not directly. I worked with the Council of Light, which was funny. The dragon came in first.
Okay.
And then the Council of Light came. And the message from the Council of Light was interesting too. It was like, you're someone we've chosen to channel through, but you're not quite there yet. Your self-confidence and any doubt within you needs to be transformed first. And so that's kind of partly why I've been working with the Council of Light, to cleanse and clear and to assist me to be of a frequency where I can actually hold that. And so I feel like the dragon was the messenger.
Right.
That would open me up to even like listening to the Council of Light, you know? Be like, I think you've got the wrong human.
It was like the dragon was the stern mother saying, okay, time to stop messing about, time to actually get serious about what you're doing now, you know?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so maybe part of me's been like, you know, that whole thing, don't go in to look at the Akashic Records for yourself. So maybe part of me's been like, maybe I won't just go and chat with the dragon just yet.
Yeah.
I'm afraid what they're going to tell me.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I think is often part of the experience, is sort of facing the fear of what you might be told, right? And that goes for me. I'm sure that goes for you. That goes for any of our clients. I mean, I've had, you know, countless people say to me, like, right before a session, I'm really nervous. I don't know what to expect. And it's like, you know, it's absolutely true that they're never going to give you anything that you can't handle. Right. And, you know, they will push you beyond your comfort level, certainly, but they're not going to give you something that is just going to make you completely lose it. Right. So it's one of those things where you do sort of avoid it until you can't avoid it anymore. And, you know, I mean, it wasn't dragon spirit, but it was actually a modality. It was breath work. So I hadn't done breath work before. It's just not something that I had done. And there was a period of time where like people kept on saying, oh, you know, have you done breath work? Have you done breath work? Have you done breath work? And I was like, okay, clearly I need to do breath work. And actually it was somebody who I had on the podcast a couple of seasons ago. She's like, oh, I need to send you this brief little breath work MP3. She's like, it's 10 minutes. It's really easy. Just go and do it. And I was like, yeah, cool. So I did. And within the first 3 minutes after they do the instruction and everything, like the first 3 minutes of the breath work, I was ugly crying so much and sobbing so much, like so much grief was just like coming out of me. And I had no idea. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was from. It didn't matter, quite frankly. Right. Yeah. Because that's the whole point of breath work, is just to get it out of your body. Right. But it's like, I think it's like your body knows instinctively that, okay, I'm going to be changed by what is going to happen. And so maybe I'm going to avoid that a little bit until I feel like I'm ready. But then it's not about the timing that you have, right? It's about, you know, okay, the universe is like, okay, Fiona, you're ready. Dragon Spirit's like, come on, you're ready. Like, time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a natural human thing, right? Because we're all we want the change. Like there's this deep heart desire for the transformation. And then our humans like just puts a little protective shell on it. But ultimately, I think I feel like is a really important piece, is that no matter what the universe wants, and you know, like however we put that, we have free will choice. So ultimately it is always, always our choice. And that I always give that to my clients too. It's just like, just because this is coming up, just because these are the actions you could take to shift this in your life, it's all up to you. You are this divine co-creator and you get to choose. And that in and of itself for most people is like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
You know,
My favorite thing that came to me recently through a channel was you are your highest authority.
Yes.
And
yes.
I love that so much. And like it came through so clear, and I'm getting chills again now. It came through so clear because I'm like, yes, like that needs to be the base of everything that you do. Because even in this whole exploration of all the things that we do, all these beautiful realms that we go into, all of the dimensions, all the things, it still has to be about you and what you're comfortable with, where you're going, what your soul purpose is, what you're, everything that you're meant to do. So even if me as an Akashic record reader or interpreter, whatever you would want to call us, and you as a channel or an Akashic record interpreter as well, like even any of the information that we give, if it doesn't resonate with somebody, then they need to be able to have their own authority and say, you know what, this doesn't really fit for me. Right. And that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, one of the things that I've realized is that when that's happened with me, it's simply usually just because of timing, right? It's usually because, well, it's not right for me now, but maybe it will be in 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. You never know. But it is very much about understanding that you have the power and the control over how much you dive into this and how much you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, to take it one step further as well is that as you become more of this embodied, awakened version of you, this unity consciousness, is the realization that the guides, that the dragons, that whoever it is that we appear to be channeling is us. It's an aspect of us. So that dragon wasn't something outside of me. It was an aspect of me, this powerful, like assured, assertive aspect of me that was telling me. And so that for me is also incredibly empowering. It's that, I think I think this is an important thing to discuss actually, because as spirituality becomes, this more and more mainstream, there's still this idea when people come in that, a psychic reader or like somehow knows more than you do or has more authority than you do. And they kind of give their authority to that person in the session. And I'm always like, you know what, take or leave this. Like, this is my perception coming through me. This is for you. Like for me, that's so important because all then we're doing is like swapping the boss at work for the psychic reading, like giving our power to someone else to tell us who we are and what is possible for us. Right. And that for me is really, really important to understand that like you say, you are your own highest authority. Part of yourself led you here. You get to take or leave whatever works for you. Because some people can be really, like have a psychic reading and they get told something and it really scares them, and and it can prevent them moving forward because someone's told them that something might happen or whatever it is. But I mean, even that, there's a perfection to that too, right? Because
there
it's all perfect. Whatever the experience is, there's a perfection to it. And it was what they needed to hear in that moment, perhaps to enable them to actually step into their power, right? How else do you learn how to step into your power than being perceivedly disempowered?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I went through that exact same thing because I basically, when I was going through the beginning of the sort of discovery phase, right? When I finally realized that I was going through a spiritual awakening and then I started going through the discovery phase, I was getting psychic readings and they would tell me something that was going to happen. And I'd be like, oh, that really sucks. Oh, I can't believe that's going to happen. And, like I would just accept it and not really understanding that there's so much more nuance to it, to the point that no, they're telling you this because you can change it. So this is going to be the outcome if you stay on this path. Yeah. But you can change the outcome if you don't like the final result, right? Yeah. And then in addition to that, that is the answer right now. It may not be the answer tomorrow. It may not be the answer in, 5 months, 6 months. Yeah. Right? So it's like a snapshot in time. Yes. And it's exactly what it is. And so I definitely fell prey a little bit to my own, I would say, defeatist attitude regarding anything that would come up that was something that I didn't want. right? So
Mm.
it'd be like, oh, woe is me. Oh, this is going to happen. Oh, woe is me. I'm not going to have this thing, or, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
then that's exactly what you're saying. Like, that's exactly what happened, to the point where I'm like, no, I need to start actually standing up and saying, no, this is not what I want for my life. I want something different,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all of that is beautiful for many, many reasons. And I had to experience that for many reasons, partially because I think that I was meant to help other people to not get completely addicted to psychic readings and,
Yeah.
and actually start putting the power back in their hands.
Yeah.
Right. And then also for myself to learn that, for my own life purpose in this lifetime and all of that. So it's very much a journey for all of us, and everybody has their own little unique journey, and it's all beautiful and special and incredible. And that's the one thing that I love about this as well, is that so many people in the records, when you see what you've done, the good and the bad, the shadow and the light, all of it, when you see who you really, really are, the amount of awe people have about how special they are is incredible. And I wish there was another word for special, because it's not a good word that encompasses what exactly it is. It's like, you're a powerful being, you're an amazing light being, like you're all of these things, and each person has such great, well, let's just say greatness about them. And just because one person has greatness about them doesn't mean that another person doesn't have greatness about them. It's like, hey, guess what? We all have that greatness.
Yeah.
It's all just sort of maybe in different fields or different things or different energies. You have dragons, right? It's like, that's something that is now sort of coming into your field. And so now you get to explore that. And that is really super, super special, right?
Yep. Yeah. The uniqueness of each and every one of us in our path, and just, I always picture white light with the rainbow. It's like, we have all the colors. We're all different, but that unity and diversity.
Yeah.
Yes. How we're all so very different, and we're here to be sovereign. We are here to be in full choice. I think that's one of the most important things for me. And one of the things that the Akashic Records has helped me understand like nothing ever before, how every single choice that we make is either taking us towards the truth of who we are or away from the truth of who we are. And it's very simple to see and feel it in the Akashic Records. It's very simple when you understand your soul essence, what feels good and what lights you up.
Right.
It's actually very simple. Does this choice take me closer to the light or closer to what I don't want? And so I loved those kind of like lessons of karma as well. Make a choice out of fear. You can only create fear. Make a choice out of freedom. You create more freedom. So it's quite simple. I find the lessons really simple. And because truth is simple, right? Light is simple.
It is.
Our human makes it tricky and messy, but essentially, I've just learned so much about universal law, karmic law, free will, how to actually go about creating a life that we desire by honoring our own energy, our own joy.
And when you do that, kind of bringing this full circle to what you were talking about in terms of unplugging from the matrix.
Yeah.
When you do that, when you get to that space and you're able to then plug back into the matrix, and I'm going somewhere here, something that happened to me today. That's why I'm bringing this up. So today I have to plug into the matrix because I have to pay my French taxes for the first time. So I have to be able to plug in to actually do these, human things that, we all have to do. Yeah. And what was really funny is that I found out from my attorney that my taxes are going to be due on Monday versus June 8th, which is when they're usually due. But like, because I'm a first time like filing, we have to get them in sooner. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I'm kind of panicking a little bit initially. And I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, okay. She can't help me with this. My lawyer can't. I need to get an accountant. I need to get a tax accountant to help me file this paperwork before Monday. How am I going to do that? And I literally went into that panic for about 5 minutes, not even. And then I stopped and I was like, oh, wait, no, that's not how this is going to go. This is not going to go that way. How this is going to go is there are a lot of people out there right now in the city that do this kind of work, and they're all really happy to work with me. And they really want to like work with me and be able to get this paperwork done by Monday or whenever it needs to be done, even if it's not by Monday, whenever it is,
Yeah.
good for the universe for me to be able to put these, this paperwork in. If it happens to be the next day after that, that's cool too. Like, I know that it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
So I was able to really like just stop and shift that entire energy of the panic and the fear and the, oh my God, and what is going to happen to no, I have control over this.
Yep.
And it's going to all work out and it's going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how, when we have this conversation right now about all of the things that are in the ethers, right? We're talking about all these beautiful things that we can access in the Akashic Records, but all of the learning and all of the lessons that we have, they culminate down to even the infinitesimal human thing like doing taxes, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, it can help us in so many different aspects of our lives.
It's incredibly practical. I say, like, working in the Akashic Records is like, sounds like the most woo thing ever, but it's the most practical thing ever for your life. Mm-hmm. It really, really is. Even if you like didn't want to hear anything about the Akashic Records, you could go to a session and it would just make so much sense. But because it's like the Akashic Records and it's in the fifth dimension, there's like this separation that it's woo, but it's not. Like you say, it's like these baseline, how you make your choices and where you're choosing to place your power, like inside of yourself or outside of yourself, and circumstantial power, which isn't true power. And so, yeah, I love that turnaround that you did, because I mean, that is the epitome of it all. I think I am the co-creator of my reality. This is what has come in. Old me would have responded like this. Nervous system me would have reacted in this way. Like, and I think that's the other thing too, working in the records, is just, you can shift so much quicker.
Yeah.
You're so much more conscious and so much more connected that it's like, I won't let myself, like, there's no way I'm going to go down there. Right. I know what that looks like. I've done that for thousands of years.
Right.
Exactly. I've done that for thousands of years, not just this lifetime, but thousands.
Yes, exactly.
So I love that you shared that example, because it's so, so very powerful that we could use in any moment of our life.
Yeah. Because I mean, how often do we have things like that in our lives that we will let it ruin an entire weekend, right? Yeah. So right now it's Friday. It's beautiful this weekend, and I have all kinds of plans going on for Saturday and Sunday. So I could have allowed this little bit of information about the taxes to ruin my entire weekend until Monday, which is when they're due. I could have been in worry and fear and angst and all of these other things surrounding all of that. Or you can shift it and actually change the trajectory of everything that's going to happen over the next, 48 to 36 hours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super useful on a practical level. And that's something that I like to tell people too, is that, when we describe what we do, I've done this, I don't know, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but when I've described what I do, whether I'm describing it in French or in English, it doesn't matter. I still get the same reaction, which is like, huh? What is that now? What? Okay, wait, you do what now? Wait, okay, past lives saying, okay, past lives. Cool, they can get that. But then you get the question, like, what are the Akashic Records? I'm like, well, it's otherwise known as the Book of Life. And I still kind of get this, huh? This sort of like blank stare, right? And so to understand that it's going to take a little bit of time for people to sort of really understand what the Akashic Records are and really know how wonderful of a tool it is, and that it is in fact practical. As you're saying, it's practical. It's something that you can use the information to improve your life in so many ways. So I'm curious, so what are some of the reactions you've gotten when you've said this?
You know what? It's funny. Like, a lot of people find me and show up for sessions because they've been referred.
Okay.
And so I always start with, you probably don't even know what to expect or why you're here. And they're like, nope. You know what I mean? So there's like this, and like their friend is like said, oh my God, this is amazing, or a family member. And so they show up and they're like, I have zero idea of what to expect. And so, yes. And then I go into the explanation, and it's still like, it's too unfathomable. Like our human, like to try and understand that there is a record of every single thought, every single choice, every single emotion, every single lifetime, that is imprinted energetically somewhere in the ethers.
Mm-hmm.
is exceptionally mind-blowing. But, you know, when you think of computers and Wi-Fi, like when you think of
Right.
Wi-Fi, really, it's the same. It's like you can tap in something green into the internet and you get all this information, or you can be more specific and put lettuce and you get all this information. So sometimes I do that. I'll like connect it to think of the internet, right? Think of the internet, which is like this endless, infinite source of information at the touch of a button. That's what the Akashic Records is, but about your entire experiences.
And it is information traveling in thin air, just like in air. It's information traveling through energy. So, I mean, it's the same, same kind of idea. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, is the internet, is Wi-Fi, is that just an extension, of what's already there? Yes. Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. That's really good. I might have to use that next, because I was at a party for a friend's birthday yesterday. And so there were people there that were spiritual and some people that weren't. So I happened to be sitting across the table from a couple of people who were, I didn't know if they were or not. But then when I mentioned the Akashic Records and I got the blank stares, that's when I was like, okay. All right, I need to back this up a little bit. But I love that analogy because I have actually often said to my Akashic guide, like, hey, I don't know what you're showing me. Can you give me more detail? Can you be more specific? Can you tell me what's going on? I know what you're showing me. I can see it, but I have no idea what it means, right? Yeah. So like, and they'll give you more information. They'll give you whatever context you need. And there have often been times when it's been like, oh, we could tell you about this, but you have nothing in your human brain that is even going to reference the information. So we're going to try to give you a close approximation, but it's not even going to come close.
Yeah, we have to have a reference point, don't we? That is a really interesting thing. Like, to be intuitive, you have to have a reference point from it, which is why I think the more you work in the Akashic Records, the more you open up, because the more reference points you're like opening up to. But someone could ask me to intuit what's wrong with a car, but because I don't have a good mechanical knowing of pieces, I'm probably not going to be able to do it very well. Right. So those reference points that you speak to are really important. And each reader, like we all have, we've got our own perspective. We've got our, your experiences of what you're reading it through, which is why someone could go to you for a reading and have a completely different reading to me, because
100%.
We're seeing it through our own unique lens. And also that soul contract with that client is different with each person. Right. And so that is also why everything is always so varied and different, but you get what you need. But it might look completely different. I'm sure our sessions don't look anything alike, even remotely.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And I'm sure that you could actually get a session with me and a session with Fiona in the exact same day. And like you said, either probably get different information or complementary information to the point where it would actually just give you an entirely new picture. Because what's really beautiful, and this is my whole reason for having this podcast, is that you are not going to be able to necessarily get the full picture of everything through just one practitioner, right? Like, you may work with a set of coaches, or you might work with a coach or work with an Akashic record reader or whoever else for a really long time. You might work with them for a couple of years. That's great. But then maybe one day you're just going to be like, you know what? I think I need a different perspective. And you go and get another session from somebody else. And then, so it's like, there's not some weird exclusivity, like, oh, if you work with me, you can only work with me. Like, that's insane. That's insane, because your reference point of knowledge is completely different from mine in the way that you grew up and the way that I grew up, and our soul contracts and, everything else. So it's like, so you're going to be able to tap into things that I wouldn't necessarily, and vice versa. Right. And then that's going to give just more information. That's all it's going to do, is going to give the client more information. So they are going to be able to have the tools that they need to then follow their own authority. Right.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah, no, I sometimes have clients go, oh, like, do you mind if I go and work with someone else? I'm like, oh my God, please. I don't, there is no competition, because it's all me and it's all you anyway. So you know what I mean? It's like, no, like, please do. Like, you have to follow those intuitive nudges and get the humanness out of the way. It's like, no, do what you need to do. Go follow your nudges, please. That's how it's like the breadcrumbs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, to bring it back to the abundance conversation, there's always enough for everyone. So it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you're going to me or Fiona or Anne Perry or, anybody else who, you all know that we all love Anne Perry, and Fiona and I met through Anne Perry. So, a little shout out to our beautiful friend there. So, it doesn't matter who you work with. It's about who you're guided to work with. And if something just pops up in your intuition, you're like, yep, that's what I need to do. Go do it. Because the only thing that can happen is your own expansion. Like, literally, that's the only thing that can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever happens. Yeah. And I love that the most, when people are like, I don't know much about you or whatever, but I just knew I read it and I needed to book. And I'm like, I love that. Those are the real, there's something there for us here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been so amazing speaking with you today. I'm so happy. So I want you to let the audience know how they can book a session with you, how they can work with you, all of your social media, all that fun stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So my business is called Freedom with Fiona. And so my website is www.freedomwithfiona.com. And I offer something called the Divine Soul Blueprint Package, which is a little 21-day package where we meet and we dive deep into your soul essence, who you are at soul level, and clear any past lives that are appearing to be blocking or restricting who and what you desire to come into today. And then when we meet up about 3 weeks later. So we have this little package of time together. So that's one of my offerings. And then I also do soul coaching packages. So I have a coaching certification as well. And I really do love working with women entrepreneurs in particular. And so all of this information is on my website. And social media wise, Freedom with Fiona on Facebook and on Instagram. And I do have a YouTube channel that's fairly new, just started it this year. And again, it will be under Freedom with Fiona.
And I will link all of those in the show notes for the podcast. On the YouTube video, I will put it in the description below, so you can find Fiona that way. Fiona, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. It's been so fun. I love having these conversations because they're kind of not everyday conversations, right?
100%. Yeah.
So it's really beautiful to feel safe to let it all out and just be fully out the closet in our, spiritual
in our woo-ness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so keep me posted on any more of the dragon spirit that you find out about, or any discoveries your daughter makes. I'd be fascinated to hear about it. Yeah.
Well, indeed. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have an amazing day and never stop exploring your soul, because it is the most important relationship you will ever have. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoulLove.com. On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.